My name is Patricia Robinson, and I was 29 years old when my boyfriend told me that people only invited me places because of him and that on my own, I was forgettable. He didn't shout it. He didn't say it in anger. That was the part that stayed with me the longest. The way he said it calmly, almost kindly, like he was offering a helpful truth. I'd been too naive to see for myself. We were sitting in the car after a dinner party, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. The air heavy with the kind of silence that only follows public embarrassment. He turned toward me in the parking lot and said it like a conclusion he'd reached a long time ago. Not an opinion, a fact. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just said good to know. I met Philip Gordon 2 years earlier when I was 27. Philip was magnetic in a way that filled rooms. He remembered names, dominated conversations effortlessly, and made people feel like something interesting was always happening around him. I was quieter. I listened more than I spoke. I preferred small dinners to crowded parties, depth over volume. For a while, we told ourselves we balanced each other. He brought me out into the world. I gave him somewhere steady to land. At least that's how the story went. Looking back, the imbalance didn't start suddenly. It crept in disguised as jokes. "Thank God I dragged you out tonight," he'd say, smiling. "You'd never leave the apartment otherwise. Or if I didn't introduce you, people wouldn't even know you were here." I laughed along because it felt easier than examining why those comments stung. I told myself he was teasing. I told myself I was lucky someone like him wanted me beside him. About 4 months before everything fell apart, the jokes sharpened. We were getting ready for one of his work events when he looked at me in the mirror and said, "Try to be more engaging tonight. I don't want people thinking I brought dead weight." He laughed afterward like that made it harmless. I nodded. I tried harder. I spoke more. I smiled wider. And still I could see it in his eyes when I fell short, that subtle disappointment like I was failing a role I never auditioned for. The breaking point came at a dinner, hosted by one of his closest friends. 8 couples. Expensive restaurant. Conversations built on promotions, vacations, and status. I listened. I asked questions. I didn't compete. Philip kept glancing at me, those looks that said, "Do something." On the drive home, he finally said what he'd been thinking all along. "People only invite you because of me," he said. "They don't actually want you there." The word forgettable landed like a quiet erasure. That night, I lay awake, replaying every social interaction of the past 2 years, wondering how long I'd been shrinking without noticing. By morning, I made a decision that felt small but carried more weight than anything I'd done in the relationship. If people only wanted me around because of Philip, then I would stop going anywhere with him. Let's see what happens. Philip had 3 events lined up that week. Normally, that wouldn't have registered as anything unusual. Our calendar was always full drinks dinners, birthdays, casual get-togethers that somehow required planning like small weddings. I usually went along without thinking. I'd show up, smile, listen, make mental notes about people's lives so I could ask the right follow-up questions the next time. I never questioned whether I belonged there, not until he told me I didn't. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was still working at the kitchen table, Philip walked past me, adjusting his jacket, and said, "What time do you think you'll be ready?" "I'm not going tonight," I said, keeping my voice even. He stopped mid-step. "What?" "You said people only invite me because of you," I replied. So I figured I'd save everyone the trouble. He laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "That's not what I meant. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just listening." His expression tightened, like he hadn't expected his words to be taken so literally. "You're really going to stay home?" "Yes." He stared at me for a moment, clearly weighing whether this was a fight worth having. Then he grabbed his keys. "Fine, do whatever you want." The door closed behind him, and for the first time in weeks, the apartment felt peaceful. He came home around 11 that night, a little louder than usual, dropping his shoes near the door. I didn't ask how it went. He didn't offer. We brushed our teeth side by side in silence, the mirror reflecting 2 people pretending nothing had shifted. Friday came quickly. Dinner at his friend Rebecca's place, one of those evenings that always ran late and left me exhausted in a way I never quite understood. While I was cooking dinner for myself, Philip leaned against the counter and asked, "You coming tonight?" "No," he exhaled sharply. "Still doing this." "I thought we agreed," I said calmly. "You go. I won't embarrass you." "That's not fair," he snapped. "I'm being forgettable at home," I said. "Isn't that better?" He didn't have a response for that. He left anyway. When he came back close to midnight, I could tell something was off. Not dramatic, just a slight edge beneath his usual confidence. "Rebecca asked about you," he said, casually tossing his phone onto the couch. I looked up. What did you tell her? That you weren't feeling well. Why lie? He frowned. Because I'm not telling my friends my girlfriend is boycotting social events to prove a point. I'm not boycotting, I said. I'm respecting what you told me. He shook his head, clearly irritated. You're twisting my words. I'm testing them. Saturday morning was different. The brunch with his college friends was always a big deal. The group he saw most often, the one he talked about constantly. Philip paced the apartment while I drank my coffee, glancing at the clock like time itself was pressuring him. You're coming today, he said finally. This has gone on long enough. No, I replied. His voice dropped. People are asking questions. What questions about me? He hesitated. About us. About why you're suddenly never around. Tell them the truth, I said. That I'm forgettable. His jaw tightened. I shouldn't have said that. But you did. He left without another word. I spent the afternoon reading, finishing a project for work, enjoying the quiet. Around 4, I heard the door open. Philip walked in and went straight to the bedroom without saying a word. No greeting, no complaint, just silence. After an hour, I knocked and stepped inside. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it had personally betrayed him. What happened? I asked. Nothing. You look like something happened. He finally looked up at me, and for the first time in 2 years, his confidence wasn't there, just uncertainty. Someone pulled me aside at brunch, he said slowly. Asked why you stopped coming. My chest tightened. Who? Jen. I sat down across from him. What did she say? He swallowed. She said, everyone's been asking about you, not why you weren't there. About you. I didn't speak. I let the silence do the work. She said they miss you, he continued. That you're one of the few people who actually listens. That you remember things. That you make people feel comfortable. The room felt suddenly very still. She asked if I'd done something to make you feel unwelcome, he said quietly. I watched him process it in real time, the realization that his certainty might have been wrong all along. Philip didn't tell me everything all at once. The words came out slowly, like he was afraid that if he said them too clearly, they would become permanent. She pulled me aside near the end, he said, rubbing his hands together. I told her you were busy with work. She said that was fine. Then she said, he stopped, swallowed hard. I waited. She said people had been asking about you all morning, that they thought it was strange I kept showing up alone. Not strange in a judgmental way, just noticeable. I felt something shift in my chest, a quiet pressure I hadn't realized had been there until it loosened. What else? I asked. Philip's voice cracked slightly. She asked if I'd said something to make you stop coming, if I'd made you feel like you didn't belong. The irony of that nearly took my breath away. What did you say? I asked. I lied, he admitted. I said you were just stressed. But she didn't believe me. He stared past me, eyes unfocused. She said if I was making you feel small, I was making a huge mistake. I leaned back against the headboard. Why would that be a mistake? He hesitated, then spoke so quietly I almost missed it. Because apparently people like you more than me. The room went silent again, heavy with the weight of something irreversible. She told me they've been complaining, he continued. Not about you. About me. About how I talk over people, how I redirect every conversation back to myself, how exhausting it can be. I watched him unravel, not dramatically, not with anger, but with the slow collapse of a self-image he'd built carefully over years. And she said, the only time I'm actually tolerable, he went on, eyes flicking to mine, is when you're there. That you soften me. You make me listen. I didn't know what to say. There was no triumph in it, no vindication, just a strange sadness, like discovering a crack in a foundation you'd trusted. They've been saying this for months, I asked. He nodded. They just never said it to me. Not until you stopped coming. I exhaled slowly. So when you said people only invited me because of you, I was wrong, he said immediately. Completely wrong. I studied his face. Then why did you say it? His shoulders slumped. Because I was scared. Scared that if you weren't there, people wouldn't tolerate me. And if you were there, they might like you more. The honesty landed harder than any insult had. I spent 2 years convincing you that you only mattered because of me, he said. When the truth is, I only mattered because of you. I shook my head. That's not fair either. I know, he said, but it's closer to the truth. Over the next few days, the shift became impossible to ignore. Invitations started arriving, texts, casual messages, follow-ups. Some were to both of us, some weren't. On Wednesday, Philip asked if I wanted to join him for drinks with his work friends. No, I said gently. He went alone, came back 2 hours later, visibly deflated. They asked about you again, he said. Kelly said she misses talking to you about books. Apparently you two had this ongoing conversation about science fiction. I frowned. I don't remember that. That's the problem, he said softly. You don't realize when you're connecting with people. Friday night, his phone buzzed while we were sitting on the couch. He stared at the screen for a long moment before handing it to me. It was a message from Rebecca. Hey, Patricia. Philip said you've been swamped with work, but we're having a small dinner next week and would love if you could make it. No pressure, but you're missed. I looked up at him. They invited me, not us. He nodded slowly, I noticed. You should go without me, I said. He sat down heavily. I think I've spent years telling myself I was the reason people showed up. Turns out I was just the loudest one in the room. I handed the phone back. What does this mean for us? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet and unsure. I think it means I need to figure out who I am when I'm not performing. And I think I need to face what I've done to you. The messages didn't stop after that. If anything, they became more direct. It started with small things. Someone asking if I'd finished the book Kelly recommended another person. Sending a meme that referenced a conversation I barely remembered having. Then came the invitations that didn't include Philip at all. A casual game night, a low-key dinner, a no pressure, but we thought of you text that made my throat tighten every time I read one. Philip watched all of this happen with a kind of stunned detachment, like he was witnessing someone else's life unfold inside his own apartment. One evening, he sat beside me on the couch and said, Jen sent me something today. I didn't look up from my laptop. What kind of something? A message, he said. Long. I closed my computer. Do you want me to read it? I think I need you to, he said and handed me his phone. It was brutal. Not cruel, just honest in a way that left no room for interpretation. Jen laid out months of observations, how Philip redirected conversations, how he dismissed other people's experiences as less impressive, how he seemed more interested in being admired than understood. And then came the line that made my chest ache. The only time you're actually bearable is when Patricia's there. She makes you listen. When she's not around, you exhaust people. I handed the phone back slowly. That's a lot. It is, he agreed, but it's not wrong. He rubbed his face fingers, pressing into his eyes. I've been telling myself I'm confident, that I'm charismatic, but I think I've just been afraid of being forgettable myself. The irony hung between us. I spent 2 years shrinking you so I wouldn't have to look at that fear, he said. I made you the quiet one so I could stay the center. I felt something inside me steady as he spoke, not because the pain disappeared, but because the confusion finally did. I need space, I said carefully, not to punish you, just to breathe. He nodded immediately. I get that. Over the next few weeks, Philip started therapy. He told me about it without defensiveness, without asking for praise. I went back to a few social events alone. Each time felt strange, like stepping into a room I'd never realized I'd already been welcome in. People talked to me, listened, asked follow-ups, remembered things about my life that I'd forgotten I'd shared. At home, Philip was quieter, more cautious with his words. Sometimes I caught him watching me with an expression that wasn't resentment or jealousy, but grief. Grief for the version of himself he could no longer be. One night as we lay in bed, he said, I don't know how to undo what I said to you. I don't either, I replied honestly. You're not forgettable, he said. I know that now. I turned toward him in the dark. Knowing it now doesn't erase hearing it then. He didn't argue. He just nodded, accepting the truth of that. The hardest part wasn't what he'd said, it was how easily I'd believed him. We didn't break up right away. From the outside, it probably looked like we were doing everything right. Philip kept going to therapy, sometimes twice a week. He started talking about insecurity instead of confidence, about control instead of charisma. He apologized often, but not performatively. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic gestures, just small, consistent attempts to change how he spoke to me, how he spoke about me, how he listened. I tried too. I started going to events again, though, not all of them, and never automatically. If he interrupted me in conversation, I corrected it. If he framed something as though I owed my social life to him, I stopped him immediately. He accepted those corrections without argument, which would have meant more to me if it hadn't come so late. But some things don't reset just because they're acknowledged. There were moments, quiet ones, when the damage surfaced unexpectedly, a pause before speaking in a group, a second guessing of whether my presence was welcome. A flicker of relief when someone addressed me directly, as if confirming I was still visible. Philip noticed. He always noticed. One evening after we returned from a small gathering, he said, "You were quieter tonight." "I know," I replied. "Did I do something?" "No," I said. "You didn't. This is just residue." The words settled heavily between us. "I spent 2 years telling you who you were," he said slowly, And now you're left sorting out which parts of that stuck. I nodded. And you're left with a social circle that doesn't revolve around you anymore. He smiled faintly. That part's been humbling. Sometimes he'd show me messages from friends, people being polite, but distant. Invitations that came less frequently. Conversations that felt thinner without me present to anchor them. He never blamed me for it, but I could see how deeply it unsettled him. And sometimes I'd get messages that made my chest tighten for a different reason. Patricia, we're doing a low-key dinner on Thursday if you're free. We miss your perspective. It's not the same when you're not there. Each one felt like confirmation and loss at the same time. 3 months after the brunch, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the evening light fading around us. I don't think we can undo this, Philip said quietly. I didn't pretend not to understand. I don't think we can either. He nodded, eyes glossy, but steady. I broke something in you. And I don't know how to live with knowing that. And I don't know how to build a future on top of something that taught me. I didn't matter, I said. There was no fight, no raised voices, just grief. We called off the engagement in March. The strangest part came after everything ended. I expected the silence, the awkward distancing, the way shared spaces usually fracture when a long relationship dissolves. Instead, my calendar filled in ways I hadn't anticipated. Rebecca still hosted dinners. Kelly invited me to her book club. A few of Philip's former coworkers organized game nights and made a point of telling me I was welcome separately, deliberately. No one framed it as choosing sides. They just kept showing up in my life, quietly reinforcing something I was still learning to accept. They weren't inviting me because of Philip. They were inviting me despite him. Philip moved to a different city 6 months later. A fresh start, he said. A chance to rebuild himself without the weight of the past. I believed him. I hoped the distance would give him clarity instead of resentment. He deserved growth, even if it couldn't happen beside me. As for me, I stayed. I learned that being memorable doesn't always look like commanding attention. Sometimes it looks like remembering someone's story when no one else does, like listening without waiting to speak, like making space instead of filling it. People didn't miss me because I was impressive. They missed me because I was present. Looking back, I don't feel vindicated. Vindication implies winning, and there were no winners here. I felt sad for the version of myself that accepted being diminished, and for the version of Philip who built his identity on something so fragile it collapsed the moment it was questioned. The moment everything changed wasn't the breakup, it was the whisper at that brunch, the quiet truth that unraveled years of certainty. Philip had built his sense of self around being the reason I belonged. When that turned out to be false, he had to confront who he actually was, and I had to confront how long I'd let someone define my worth. I was never forgettable. I was just quiet in a world that confuses volume with value. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do is convince you that you don't matter. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is test whether that's actually true.